Welcome to the Hopening, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadrone and Marina Taran Maneri. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopening.com. The Hopening is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hopening. This is the place where hope is happening. And this is episode number 126. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for being a brand new viewer, or if you're a regular viewer or listener, we thank you. We appreciate you coming. So I am Fran, and this is my beautiful co-host Marina, and together our mission is to bring hope to you and to whoever that you come in contact with. So our theme today is boundaries, and this is an extremely important topic as we come into the holiday season. Our American friends, you're right in the midst of the holiday season. And in Canada here, we're coming up to Christmas. So no matter where you're watching from, this is always an important topic. So, Marina, what is it about boundaries that you thought that we should talk about today, and why?
Thank you, Fran. This is actually something that came through one of our viewers who contacted me a few weeks ago and saying she listened to one of our episodes and she has questions. And so the backstory was that she's a very giving person. I would refer to her as an empath. And she was talked into opening her house up to somebody who was in need of accommodation. And because she has extra accommodation, but that is part of her income to rent out rooms in her house. She came to an agreement with this person to because this person couldn't pay her to do some work for her, some chores, running some errands and things like that, because this lady is working full time. And so this is just a way that she could help somebody in need by providing, in a way, some employment in exchange for rent. And this person who moved in ended up never doing a thing. She she would disappear every day, and everything, all the list of things that she promised she would help for as payment for rent, she neglected to do 100% of them. And now this lady who contacted me felt very she felt horrible because she felt that um, where do you draw the line? And because she feels so much empathy for this lady, how much of this does she take? And so that is where the whole conversation came up, because when she asked me for advice, my advice to her was, you need boundaries. So, Fran, I think all of us can understand this situation and have been in a place in life where we had to put up boundaries for ourselves, even if it meant standing up to somebody that could potentially be hurt through that. So, how have you experienced situations like that in your life?
As you're talking, I think about why the lady who contacted us has those types of boundaries where she allows people to come into her life and then feel resentment about it. So I think there's a few things going on. The book that I would recommend to anyone about boundaries is this one here, by Cloud and Townsend. And it's called Boundaries. And there's a workbook that goes with it as well. So in many practices, they use this book, and they suggest for anyone like the person that got a hold of us is to read a book like this, because boundaries are not all the same for everyone. Some people need boundaries that are like cement walls for certain things, and other people create boundaries that are more permeable, that allow some things through, but others definitely not. So for everyone, we need to be able to decide for ourselves what is a boundary that is a solid brick wall and what can be permeable. Because, yes, those of us that are empaths, especially if we're from a certain background when we're children, allow more allow more people to invade our boundaries. And so taking control of your life is really something that we have to do for ourselves, because there are people, yes, that will invade your space. They will push down your wall and invade your space. So I think, first of all, we have to know where our boundaries are. We have to walk the perimeter of our castle, right? Walk the perimeter and find out which part of the wall is weak. So for myself, it's always emotional boundaries, emotionally,
Interesting.
right? For always. So because of the way I was raised, and maybe yourself too, Marina, we were taught, and I think part of it is a gender thing. We were taught that we need to listen and obey, and that men were in charge. Men were in charge in those days. And it could have been because my mom was an at home mom, or it could have been because of our religion. It could have been whatever. But I just did. I learned what my mom learned, what my mom did, right? And so my boundaries are emotional boundaries. And over time, that put me into situations, especially with men that I was resentful. I got hurt easily. I was super sensitive, and I regretted some of the things that I allowed at that time to happen to me. And that's when I learned that I had to set up these emotional boundaries, because it was hurting me and it was hurting my children, and it was for our best interest. So, specific situations, there's many. So anyone who's ever been in an abusive relationship have had boundaries, problems.
Right.
So I'm not sure about yourself, Marina, but do you have situations in your life that you would like to talk about?
Well, childhood issues, as we have discussed many times, resulted in me becoming a people pleaser. And being a people pleaser also meant that I self-sacrificed. And I would never say no. I always wanted to help everybody, and I would jump through fire to help anybody in need. But that means that I started to self-sacrifice, and I almost lost touch of who I really am. Almost as if I never had any rights. And this is a story I've told many times. When I had my big aha moment in life was in 2010, when I was attacked by a man I was in a relationship with.
Mhm.
And in the same situation, I set boundaries for my children. And it was that night, as I was debriefing after the police left, I was thinking, okay, what is missing from my life? And it was boundaries. I didn't have boundaries for myself. And then my thoughts went to, but why were I able to put boundaries for my children? Big boundaries. You will not dare to cross them. Strong, but never for myself. And I realized it's because I love them. And it was like this light bulb went on. Does that mean I do not love myself? And it just led to so many such ah, awarenesses in my life, growth. self-analyzing myself. Why can I not put up boundaries? And it comes back to one of the themes that you and I have spoken about nonstop over the last 3 and a bit years, and that is not being worthy, not feeling I'm worthy, feeling that if I don't jump through hoops to help other people and self-sacrifice, I'm not acceptable. I'm not likable. I will be alone. Nobody would like me. But hey, it didn't work anyway. I had to start to set up boundaries for myself. And yes, the theme of being an empath as well. It's always feeling so sorry for other people, but a lot of times at the expense of yourself, wanting to help, but at the expense of yourself. So where is the line? What this lady asked me specifically, what is my lesson in this? And I always refer to the oxygen mask on an airplane. If you help yourself first, then you can help others. But if you don't help yourself first, you will suffocate. You will be not benefiting from any situation. You will, in a sense, be punished. And this is exactly what happened because this lady didn't get the work done that she needed this tenant to do, and she lost income. So, where are the boundaries? And then she said, but I feel so bad. I feel so bad to tell this lady. And this is one of my biggest go-tos, Fran. I once heard this explanation by somebody I follow that we all come into this life to learn our own lessons. I have Marina's lessons, you have Fran's lessons. Now, if you go through a hard time and I say, oh, I feel so sorry for Fran, I'm going to go and help her out. Am I not stealing your lesson from you? And that was such a big aha moment for me. So, this lady who is in trouble, if she keeps on, because this is apparently after the fact a pattern that she goes through, she goes from person to person to person, overstay her welcome, and never do what she promised to do. Now, if people keep on bailing her out, how is she ever going to learn that the only way I can get myself out of this pickle is actually to work hard, to be of help and be a blessing in this lady's life instead of being a burden on her? And if people keep on bailing her out and keep on giving her things, she will never learn that lesson.
I was flipping through this book, the Boundaries book that I just showed you, and something just popped out at me. And it's about halfway through the book. It says, health comes from owning unmet childhood needs and working them out. So, in order to decide for ourselves what is best, not just for this other person, but for me, we have to know ourselves. We have to understand. When I listen to you, Marina, I know that you figured it out. You understand that the reason that you tend to go in a certain direction is because you were a people pleaser. I know that the reason I tend to be the same way is because of the way I was raised. But until people really dissect their childhood, they're going to keep on making the same lesson. The same lesson will keep on coming back. It will keep coming up. Because no doubt the lady that got a hold of us has experienced some other type of boundary issue in the past. And this lady that came into her life and lived in her house for a while was just one more repeat of the lesson. So we all need to understand ourselves and really look critically at the way we were raised, because there are good things about the way we were raised. And there are other things, like for yourself, you protected your children like a mother bear. That's where you put your boundaries up. And for myself too, that's where I put my boundaries up when it came to protecting my family. And so let's do it for ourselves now. And the only way we can do that is looking at our childhood, maybe young adulthood, very critically. And when I say critically, I don't mean in a negative way. I mean in a very analytical way. To take a look to see what are the behaviors of other people, siblings in your family. What are other behaviors that you may express in different situations that have to do with boundaries? Because it's not just emotional boundaries. Cloud and Townsend say in their book that there are 4 different types of boundaries that we need to have. The first is a physical boundary, a mental boundary, an emotional boundary, and a spiritual boundary. And people might say, well, why a spiritual boundary? Well, depending on the way you were raised, religion-wise, that could cloud a person's judgment as well. Because I think back to the example of the lady, right? The lady who had this woman in her house and lost income and jeopardized her own happiness and freedom and ability to get on in the world. There might be a religious link there where you're supposed to help your neighbor, you're supposed to give.
Probably, yeah.
So you're supposed to show kindness. However, when we start feeling resentment, that's not from God. That whole idea cannot be from God. So we should actually talk a little bit about all 4 types of boundaries, just because there are people throughout who listen to this show that are going through all kinds of different phases of their lives. So I think if we can touch on all 4 boundaries right now, just for little bits of time, it might be helpful. So the first is physical boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Who can touch you and in what circumstances?
Right, that's a very good one. I mean, it's like rules of life. It's yes, if and I mean, touch is a very interesting thing because touch can be endearment as well, but even that should have boundaries. If I walk down the street and a person comes from the front and wants to touch me out of endearment, that's a completely different thing than my grandchild running in the house and giving me a hug out of endearment. That's a completely different thing. So again, no, I always call it the personal bubble. Who's allowed in my personal bubble and who's not? And have those boundaries. What are you comfortable with and what not? And when is it okay and when is it inappropriate?
Yeah, especially in the workplace. If we work with other people, if we're in an institution where we're going to be involved with other people during the day in a physical way, physical presence, what is our bubble? Who's allowed to touch us on the arm? Who's allowed to steer us with our elbow? Who's allowed to touch your back?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
all
things
of
have
that.
changed a lot in our
Look,
lifetimes about what is acceptable and what not. And I think awareness is very good. Tear on the side of caution. That's all I'm saying.
exactly, exactly. And express it as well.
Yeah.
If we're not comfortable with somebody else's touch, express it. Express it in a kind and gentle manner.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all we need, to be kind and gentle, but
This kind
also,
of make me think of a funny example when I used to work with seniors and in the first place I work with seniors, they love to hug and I love to hug. I've no problem with hugging, but sometimes I had to put boundaries in place about the kind of hug that I would accept from certain people. So it was Wayne calls it a bro hug, like so from the side, you know. So that always made me laugh. And there were certain people that when I see them coming, I would say, from the side, thank you very much. But
uh-huh,
it's boundaries, expressing what is acceptable.
That's right. And I think that goes for even perhaps extended family members. We're getting into the holiday season. Um, what is acceptable and what is not? If you feel uncomfortable, it's not acceptable. Your inner
But
guide is telling you. And maybe someday it will be acceptable. But if your
yeah.
inner guide is uncomfortable, it's time to say something.
So
And it's,
sorry, Fran, I keep interrupting you, but I'm kind of giggling to myself here because another funny example is I grew up in South Africa. I've been in Canada now for 24 years. And the cultural difference is huge because in South Africa, when you go to a place and you see somebody you know on the street and they sometimes are not even a friend or a family member, you kiss them smack on the mouth. It's like a mwah. And so after living away from there for a while, I find it super uncomfortable. I don't do that. I give hugs, but no, I don't do that. But that's a cultural difference. But it's to me, it became a huge boundary. I just don't do that. Very close family members, but very close.
yeah, it would have to be. And certain European countries are
Yeah.
quite,
But they do on the cheek. In South
yeah.
Africa, it's smack on the mouth.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, that's a
So
personal boundary for you.
personal boundaries. The next is
Oh,
mental boundaries.
yes.
Mental boundaries give you the freedom to have your own thoughts and opinions.
Mm.
Ah, so Marina, do you have any small stories that you can tell about having your own thoughts and opinions and being able to express them
Yeah,
in a
this is
way
a big
that's,
one for me, Fran, because I'm somebody who is working very hard every single day on harnessing my thoughts and not allowing negative thoughts to come in. And to me, that's a big mental boundary. And sometimes when I do get those negative thoughts for whatever reason to come in, I would stop myself and say, no, that is not crossing my mind. Because in the work that you and I do, thoughts becomes things. And when we are like Marissa Peer teaches us that our mind's only job is to make our thoughts real. So if we think horrible thoughts or fearful thoughts, it will become real. So I'm quite vigilant of that. And I really try my best and work on it. It's a journey, it's a process to catch myself. Sometimes I do get in a situation where it would run away from me, but then it's like a puppy that you get. And that puppy, when you first get it, it has a mind of its own. It wants to run everywhere and pee everywhere and do its business everywhere and bark at everything, but you have to teach it. And that's how our mind is. So a lot of times I have to see my mind as, oh, there goes that puppy running off into the street again. So rein it in, pull it back and say, no, we don't go there. It's a dangerous place. So that's one of the ones that I can think of. How about you?
I like what you just mentioned about the puppy. And for me, I've mentioned it before. It's in the Bible, it's in the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. And you take them captive. You take those thoughts captive to God, to your higher power, to whomever you know can deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So I visualize actually the handcuffs on the wrists. I take them
Mm,
captive.
mm,
I
mm.
put the tape over the mouth, right?
And thoughts is such an interesting thing because it's something that happens in secret. We don't express all our thoughts. And maybe it's a good thing, but maybe it's a bad thing because maybe we will be more accountable if we do. But it's even capturing those innermost thoughts before they become things, not just the
Mhm,
spoken word, but
mhm.
thoughts.
Yeah, visualize it. Take that thought and escort that thought to the door.
Mhm, mhm.
Visualize it out of your house, or take that puppy take that puppy and put the puppy in the kennel. um,
Right.
right? Because visualizing it is got so much power to the power of visualization. Because if we've got a thought that runs around in our head, untethered, unbridled, unmuzzled, it can wreak destruction, especially if we're on a low day. So I've got to start thinking about, when do I have those destructive thoughts? So I made a list. When do you tend to have the most destructive thoughts, Marina? And I bet you it's on my list here.
Well, I was sick last week, and I was really sick. So this is why we skipped a week in our broadcast here. But it's when my body is not really cooperating, when I don't feel strong, when I feel weak. It's as if that puppy gets the opportunity to run away. And that's when I have to harness it. And also, certain situations that's from my past that are based in drama and that would pull me in. And before I know it, it's like my thought runs like an avalanche. It just takes over. And before I know it, it's uncontrollable. But I became quite sensitive to understanding that I cannot, I don't like the way I feel when I allow certain thoughts. I don't like to have those thoughts. I don't like the way it makes me feel. So being
Yeah,
quite sensitive to that.
yeah. Well, you mentioned it. Um, when you don't feel well. So
Mhm.
if we don't feel well, it can be for many reasons. It can be a virus or a bacteria or whatever, overwork. But if we're not getting enough rest and sleep, if for whatever reason we're not getting enough hours of sleep and rest, thoughts will invade. So we need to keep a check on that. We also need alone time. Even an extrovert, Marina, I think you're an extrovert, right? I'm an introvert. So we still need solitude. We need alone time. So if we've had too many people around us all day long, too many people taking energy and whatever they, whatever's going on, and holiday season coming up, we're gonna be rubbing. There's gonna be lots of friction with each other, right? Lots of rubbing up, not physically, but mentally, emotionally. So too much rubbing causes static, and too much static causes our heads to go somewhere.
Mhm.
Most of the time, if we're not out in nature enough, going for walks, going for a run, going for a hike, even shoveling snow, if there's snow on the ground here now, if we're not outside enough, thoughts will begin to intrude. We need to have enough, and that goes into exercise as well.
Oh, yeah.
If we've been sitting too much, whether it's in a car, where do many people have a fight with their spouse or their partner? It's in the car, it's in the traffic, if we don't get enough exercise, the thoughts will come in. Nutrition. So if not our diet, but our lifestyle nutrition is not where it should be, too much empty calories, too much caffeine, too much sugar, too much party foods,
Anything.
alcohol. We're not at a place to make us even be able to think properly, because our brain needs proper nutrition. So all of that stuff. We need enough play. We need to be able to play in our lives. If too much work, I mean, for you, Marina, you love to sing. For me, I love to play piano. I love to do art. I love to read. But if we're not getting enough the things we like to do to play, the thoughts will intrude. And the last thing that I put on my list is, we need to keep our brain learning. Keep
That's a
it
very
busy
healthy thing to
learning.
do.
And if we get stuck in the holding pattern of only having the same ideas, only ever reading the same types of books, or looking at the same types of TV programs, or listening to the same types of podcasts, our brain gets into a holding pattern.
Yeah. That's Very, very good points. And I always, from my experience working with seniors for a long time, you observe. And one of the things I saw is I'm not 100% in favor of a dead cold retirement because your brain, it's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. And we see that. So to me, learning and music is important, but keep on learning. My husband is semi-retired now. So when he say, "Oh, I have a very quiet week," I'm like, "Okay, what are you going to do?" Because he had a list of things that he wanted to do when he retires. So I'm like, "You said you want to learn this, and you're going to do that, and you're going to do that. So which one of the four are you going to do today?" So keep
Wow.
him busy, keep his mind going, learning, keep learning, make music, learn a new language, play an instrument, go to an art class, join the gym, like whatever it is. Good, good, good points, man.
Yeah. Keep your brain active so that the intrusive thoughts don't get a
Right,
chance to come in.
right.
And when they do, catch them and put them back in the kennel, or catch them and put the handcuffs on and escort them out the door.
Yeah, so it comes back to boundaries, have those rules. These
Mhm.
are my boundaries. These are the thoughts that I allow for myself, thoughts that would make me happy, thoughts that would give me hope. We're in the opening. Thoughts that would put a smile on my face, that would excite me for life.
I love that. It's like excite us for life, for
Yeah,
sure.
and it's a choice. A thought is a choice. A thought is something that can be changed.
Oh, definitely, definitely. But if too many of them get involved, they start to multiply. They're like the bacteria. You get too many together and they start multiply exponentially.
Right.
So grab them while they're still limited in number. I think you and
Mhm.
I both know people that are very difficult to be around because everything about their demeanor is so negative. It's so difficult, and we really do need to limit our time with
Right.
people
Now
that are
that's a great
negative.
boundary.
It's
That's a
yeah.
great boundary. You don't have to avoid people, but you can limit your time. I have people I limit time with. I don't avoid them, but I also don't allow myself to be constantly in their environment because they are combative or they are argumentative, and I don't do that. I don't do that. I just don't do that. So it's just my choice. That's a
That's
boundary.
right. That's a boundary too. So the next one is emotional boundaries, and emotional boundaries help us deal with our own emotions and disengage from the harmful, manipulative emotions of others. So I think we've spoke on that
Yeah.
quite a bit already, emotionally. And re- analyze, look back, take a good look at your childhood, your early adulthood. What formed you into the human that you are? Is it beneficial to believe that stuff?
Well, you touch on something here, and I think almost like a role play. So sometimes I would, when I have to make a decision, I would role play and say, if I decide to do this, how will it make me feel? And will it make me feel overwhelmed? Will it make me feel excited? Also, I'm a person who tend to easily feel overwhelmed and had to learn that overwhelm came from feeling that I am not good enough to do the task at hand and to start to say, but I can do it. My grandson is 3 years old and he goes to a gymnastic class and he showed up on Saturday. They came over for dinner on Saturday night right after he had his gymnastics class. And it's just climb on everything, try anything. But they had this t-shirt on. I am strong. I am able. I'm happy. I can do it. And I cannot even remember everything that was on this t-shirt. And we asked the children, his parents, about what is this? And they said, well, even at this class, before the class start, they chant this. They say, I am strong, I'm capable, I can do this. And like a long list of things. He recited that. Now I understand because a while back I took him to the park and he was going on a section that I thought he was too young to do. And he said to me, Oma, I can do it. And he kept on saying, I can do it, I can do it. And when he got to the top, he jumped up and he's down. He said, Oma, I did it, I did it. So that's that attitude that I adopted in when overwhelm comes. So analyzing my own emotions. If this happens, how am I going to feel? Before I just jump in and say, yes, I can do it. Giving myself the permission to say, no, no, I cannot do this. I'm not explaining it to anybody else, but no, why? Because I have a boundary in regards to that. I'm not going to add another thing on my plate because I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. And not even saying that I'm sorry, but plain no. I cannot accommodate that. I have to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. And that person might be disappointed,
Right.
but they will probably find someone else to do it for them.
And when it comes to something like a rental agreement, is there actually an agreement in place? Do you have a physical agreement that two people sign as a tenant and a homeowner? Because if that's not in place, you really, it's going into a gray area. And at the end, you take your own rights away. So that's all boundaries.
And I,
Boundaries.
yeah, and I like what you just said. You talked about the homeowner and a physical contract in place. And sometimes there needs to be a type of a contract involved with protecting your emotions, protecting yourself when it comes to emotional stuff. Like up front, if we're getting into a new relationship with a
Mhm.
physical relationship, what are my boundaries? What are my
Yes,
boundaries I
that's
will allow
important.
and not allow? If I put them on the table at the beginning and that other human chooses to cross those boundaries, then I know who that human really is
Exactly.
without having
Exactly.
to waste years with this person. Because right from the start, I know that I will allow this, but I will not allow this. Okay, sounds good to me. If
Right.
there's that human and he follows or she follows what your boundary rules are, then we can start to allow permeation.
Right.
Later, when you develop trust, later when the bubble of physicality may include that other person. So if they know from the beginning, if we know from the beginning, this will work, no, this is definitely not going to work.
Mhm. It's interesting because I am, you know, that I've worked a lot with people with weight issues. And there are boundaries in that too,
Mhm.
because there is a physical action or inaction required on top of decisions. And that is boundaries. And I have an entire list that's sitting right here on my desk. A lot of times when people comes to us, and it doesn't matter what the issue is, there's a level of desperation. And then there's coupled on the more positive side with a deep desire to change something that's not working in their life. So this is my list of D's. When that desire and and the desperation is deep enough, the decision is made. I need to change. I need help. Once the decision is made, then what boundaries will benefit me? What do I need to put in place? And that is the determination, determine. And in order for to determine something and turn it into an action to become a determination, there needs to be discipline and dedication. So I have rules in my life, and it comes to many things we've touched on today. If I do this, how is it going to make me feel? What is more important to me? Let's talk about eating. eating that piece of chocolate cake right now, or deciding, actually, I'm going to feel hungry. And I love feeling hungry because when I'm hungry, I'm shrinking. So what is the long-term benefit to the one versus the short-term pleasure? And that short-term pleasure is always followed by an undesirable emotion, guilt. And then in all of this, where is your power? What gives you power? Boundaries. Following through on your own boundaries.
And as well, we're going into the holiday season. We're going to be surrounded by food.
Yes.
And this might be your aunt's favorite, the recipe that she makes, and she's going to bring it to your house, or you're going to her house for the holiday. Having a firm boundary, not only for yourself, but to be able to express that boundary to somebody else is not easy. But like you said, you had all of those this decision, the determination, all of those things. What is more important, to please your aunt or to shrink in size so that you can feel good about yourself and guilt-free?
Exactly. There is something so powerful in having that self-discipline to say no, whether it
Very.
is to an unwelcome guest or whether it is in something you know, if you're going to eat that, it's not benefiting you.
Yeah, exactly. I like
Oh.
that. I'm glad you brought it up.
I have one more question before we say goodbye, and that is, when is it okay to push a boundary?
When is it okay to push a boundary? Great question.
Your
So
own boundaries, not anybody else's, only yours.
okay, give me an example. Give me an example.
Well, for me, the reason this question came up for me is when we have self-limiting beliefs, if we have a belief already and a boundary, and that subconscious boundary that I cannot do this, in my case, I'm overwhelmed, just give up. That is a boundary that is not necessarily a conscious boundary that we chose, like, no, I'm gonna eat cake. It is a subconscious boundary, and it's more harmful than it's helpful. And that is a boundary to be pushed.
Yeah. I think for myself, I need to look at my childhood and look at my weaknesses in my childhood, and then decide for myself, am I still that person, or am I someone totally new, someone who used experiences from her past to create where I am right now, but not to hinder me. So
Mhm.
as I was when I was a small girl, I was extremely shy, so shy. And one of my deepest fears was public speaking. I was so afraid of public speaking. That was my deepest fear. And so I knew that I had to push that boundary. I knew I had to in
Right.
order to get where I needed to be in life. So, and I did. And now that fear of public speaking has become one of my greatest strengths. And I think, Marina, if we can look back, often our biggest weakness has become our biggest strength right now.
Right.
And working through that boundary, pushing that boundary, and popping through the boundary. And
Yeah.
intrusive thoughts might come wiggling back in once in a while, but take them captive, lead them out
Mhm.
the door, and remind yourself of what you have accomplished
Right.
and that you can do this. This is nothing.
And that's a great example because that's, you were mentioning earlier that I'm an um, extrovert, you're an introvert. And I think I was born an extrovert, but life happened. And I grew up in a family where children were seen and not heard. And I didn't have freedom to express myself. I couldn't say what I wanted to. I would get in trouble if I did. So I became afraid of speaking, and I started to stutter when I was about elementary school age. And um, I had to, even at a young age, but I had to push that boundary. I had to change the goalpost, and now I have no problem because I'm really a born extrovert. I love people. I thrive. When I have a week that I didn't see enough people, guess what I do? I'm on the phone. Do you want to come over for dinner? So that's just my personality. My poor husband, he's the opposite. He would no, stay away, stay away. But it's just but having to recognize that in myself and push that boundary so that I could meet that trueness of who I am, authenticity.
And sometimes the need to be able to do something pushes
Yeah.
us to pushes us through to make us attempt, make us try. And then once we try, we realize, hey, it wasn't that bad. And then we do it again. And then we do it again until it becomes like second nature to us or something
Yeah,
that you
exactly.
are passionate about, like your
Exactly.
business, your Christmas caroling business,
Yeah.
a passion.
Yeah, and that's one thing is like in a few years ago, oh, it's overwhelming me. I changed that. It, it very, and I used to say it's like herding cats, and then I'm like, you know what? I actually love cats. I'm actually good at herding cats, so I'm herding the cats. So
Oh
it's
gosh, you're one in
changing
a million.
everything. Yeah.
Anyway, we hope that we have helped maybe a little bit in creating some understanding, a better understanding of boundaries. Like Marina and I said, when we can understand ourselves, then we can understand the boundaries that are important to us. Because Marina's boundaries and my boundaries and her husband's boundaries are different. And some boundaries need to be solid, and some boundaries can be impermeable, allow some things through and not others.
Yeah.
Maybe we're allowing ourselves to look over the fence or other people to look over the fence. And maybe there's a gate somewhere that
Yeah.
we choose to open once in a while.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Fran, and thank you to everybody listening and watching us. And we will be back next week with more hope. Remember to subscribe and tell your friends about us. Share our videos and our links and everything. And we will see you back here next week with more hope.
Thanks, Marina. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. See
No
you
problem.
soon.
Bye.